I stopped composting the normal way because it was wasting time, space, and nutrients. For years I did compost by the book, a pile in the corner, layers of brown and green, turning when I remembered, waiting months and sometimes a full year for something usable. It worked technically, but it was slow, messy, and oddly disconnected from the garden itself. The biggest problem wasn't patience. It was loss. Heat drove off nutrients, rain leached minerals out the bottom, and half the biology that mattered most never made it back to my beds. At some point I realized the forest never does this. There's no compost pile under oak trees. Soil builds itself right where the plants are growing. That's when I stopped composting the normal way and moved to what I now call the pileless method. What pileless composting actually means in practice. Pileless composting isn't about skipping decomposition, it's about changing where and how it happens. Instead of concentrating organic matter in one hot-managed pile, decomposition happens directly in the soil or on top of it, driven by fungi, worms, and moisture rather than heat. So, this keeps nutrients right where plants can actually access them, and it lets the soil structure improve, continuously instead of just in cycles. The goal really shifts away from making finished compost, and instead, it becomes about feeding the soil food web right in place. Why do traditional compost piles lose more than most gardeners realize? Well, hot composting mostly favors bacteria, which break material down really quickly, but not so efficiently when it comes to long-term soil building. Nitrogen gets lost as gas, carbon is basically burned off as heat, and the fungal networks that support perennials and woody plants, they're mostly destroyed in the process. Turning the pile, it does add oxygen, but it also dries things out and honestly, just further disrupts the biology. By the time your compost is finished, a lot of the original energy has already escaped. What's left is still useful, sure, but it's definitely diluted. Pileless methods slow things down just enough to keep that energy in the system. The core of the pileless system is layering, not mixing. Instead of collecting scraps and hauling them to a pile, organic material goes straight onto garden beds or into shallow trenches between rows. Kitchen scraps, leaves, weeds, prunings, and even cardboard are added in thin layers. So, the key is contact. Materials are always touching the soil, and they are always covered. Nothing is left exposed to sun or air for long. This creates a moist, oxygen-balanced zone where fungi and worms do the work quietly. Begin with bare soil or an existing bed. Lay down a thin layer of coarse material like small branches, chopped stems, or dry leaves. This creates airflow and prevents compaction. On top of that, add your green material. Vegetable scraps, spent plants, coffee grounds, or fresh weeds work well. Keep this layer thin, no more than a few centimeters. Immediately cover it with carbon. Shredded leaves, straw, wood chips, or even torn cardboard work. The cover is non-negotiable. It prevents smells, deters pests, and locks moisture in. Water lightly, just enough to dampen everything, then walk away. Repeat this layering whenever you have material. For crops that demand more nutrients, like tomatoes, peppers, or squash, trench composting works especially well. You just dig a narrow trench about 20 to 30 centimeters deep alongside the planting row. Then, drop in kitchen scraps and soft garden waste, and cover it all with soil and mulch. Roots actually grow toward the decomposing material as it breaks down, accessing nutrients gradually, instead of all at once. This method is clean, fast, and honestly nearly invisible once everything is planted. Moisture is the engine. Instead of turning, you manage water. Dry systems stall, overly wet systems smell. The sweet spot feels like a wrung-out sponge. Mulch regulates this naturally, reducing evaporation and buffering heavy rain. If decomposition slows, add water and more carbon rather than stirring things up. Soil organisms will rebalance themselves without interference. Soft greens disappear in weeks, leaves take a season. Woodier material breaks down slowly, but it feeds fungi for years. That's a feature, not a flaw. The pileless method builds layered soil with fresh inputs on top and long-term carbon deeper down. This creates structure, water retention, and nutrient storage that a finished compost application just can't replicate. There's no hauling, no turning, and honestly, no waiting around for finished compost. Nutrients, well, they never leave the garden. Worm populations just explode, and fungal threads really start to stitch the soil together. Beds become softer, darker, and honestly, way easier to work with each season. Plants show steadier growth instead of those feast and famine cycles we're used to seeing. Most importantly, this system, it scales naturally. Whether you've got one bed or an entire garden, it works the same way. So, pileless composting doesn't mean that compost piles are, totally useless. If you've got large volumes of diseased plants, invasive weeds, or manure, you may still need to use hot composting. But honestly, for everyday garden waste and kitchen scraps, compost piles become optional rather than essential. That's exactly why I'll never go back to composting the old way. Once you see decomposition as a continuous process instead of a product you manufacture, everything changes. Soil becomes a living system instead of a container you refill. The pileless method isn't insane because it's extreme. It's insane because it's obvious once you try it. This is how soil has always been built. We just forgot. If this kind of practical soil-first gardening speaks to you, subscribe for more grounded techniques that actually work, and share this with another gardener who's tired of managing compost instead of growing food. If this kind of practical soil-first gardening speaks to you, subscribe for more grounded techniques that actually work, and share this with another gardener who's tired of managing compost instead of growing food. If this kind of practical soil-first gardening speaks to you, subscribe for more grounded techniques that actually work, and share this with another gardener who's tired of managing compost instead of growing food.